thanks for joining me today, everybody. We're going to be launching a new series of video interviews with Packt, focusing on early stage marketing at deep tech startups. And I'm really, really pleased to have with me today, Gabriel Manor. Gabriel, it's lovely to meet you. Do you want to talk a little bit about who you are, what your background is?
Yeah, so I'm also really happy to be here and to open this season because like developer focused go-to-market is my greatest hobby for the last 2 years. So Gabriel, I have a long background as a developer, as a senior individual contributor. I've been like principal engineer. But a year ago, I decided to cross the line to the business side, and nothing was better to convince the developer to do stuff. I don't like the term selling to developers, so I prefer always use the term of go-to-market, because one of the nice things about developers is that they are the decision taker, but they are not the decision maker. So that's a quite complex go-to-market journey to work with the people who taking the decision, but then let someone else work with the people who make the decision and actually buy something from. For the last year, I'm leading the developer relation in Permit.io, a startup focused in letting application developer create a fine-grained authorization in a simpler way than doing it alone. And that's all. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really interested to talk to you specifically about an article that you wrote on Medium not too long ago. And it was effectively answering the question, what is DevRel? Which, I work in tech publishing. It's a question I hear all the time. I'd imagine you hear it all the time. Talk me through a little bit about what prompted you to want to write that article.
Yeah, so since I started a year ago, this question coming along all the time. Like you tell people that you do DevRel and they immediately ask, but what is DevRel? Or we do have DevRel in our company, but I'm not sure what they kind of work to do. So the thing with developer relations is that there are a lot of or many roles in like go-to-market organizations that needed to use like a better language when it's coming to developers. So it doesn't matter if you are like a product manager, product marketing manager, program manager, technical writer, whatever go-to-market role you have, when it comes to do it with developers, you need to develop this extra layer to do the work against developer. And developer has some unique points that everyone understands. First, they are feeling that they know everything better than anyone else. So a developer with the power that developing software let in their end, they are always sure that I can solve everything with software. And if I can solve everything with software, that means no one can teach me how to solve something because I know the solution. So when you are doing, again, any kind of go-to-market, when you do, for example, a product management, and you need to have the developer as a persona, you need to understand how to develop a relationship to create a trust that you can solve a problem for people who know how to solve any kind of problem. So DevRel is like this extra layer for this various go-to-market role, this extra layer of creating trust and work with developers as users or customers. Well, for example, one of the things that I like when I'm doing DevRel or speak about DevRel is that I don't have customers. I have users. I think this is a mindset that everyone in DevRel need to change. I'm not working with customers. I'm working with the users. If I want to build a relationship, want to build a trust, I need to look at them as users, as people who I don't have any interest to sell them something.
Yeah.
So this is actually a terminology I always trying to change. So when someone say in the company customer, I say, no, they are users.
Yeah. We have a similar dynamic within Packt, thinking about developers as users and ultimately caring about what challenges they face, what pain points they're thinking about, what's beneficial and advantageous for them, and that the product comes later and what you're selling them. Ultimately, the only reason why a developer would be interested for any reason at all is if you're helping to basically get alongside them and solve those specific pain points and challenges. So I definitely resonate with that principle.
Yeah.
You speak a lot about kind of key values that you feel are important to developers within your article. Can you expand a little bit more around those kind of key values that you see, or you experience as your time as a developer as well?
Yeah. So what I think the basic thing about any kind of relationship, this is why I like the developer relation specifically, is building a trust, right? So as a developer, the thing that is most important for me is one, that the organization, the one sell me something, will never waste my time because I have enough to deal with. So that's the first point in the trust that we need to build, that we are going really save your time and not just waste it on a more and more layers to create on, right? And the second is to be open, right? If I want to have any kind of relationship, I need to be open. Relationship without people that being open to each other, not working. So it could go, for example, for open source, but even if your source is actually closed, the attitude that you need to give to developers. So for example, one of the things that I like is to emphasize the thing that we are not supported. If I'm creating content, if I'm do any activities with the developer, I'm always like to emphasize this is a problem that we are not handling. We are not trying to solve everything. I don't have any cliche like sentences here that state, I can solve all your problems. No, I'm open. I know how to solve one problem. I can help you to solve that. And I think that openness, building a trust that will lead to our relationship. And that's the most important thing when it came to work with developers.
It's an interesting perspective, because I guess in traditional marketing, people will be bred and brought up to think, well, I only want to talk about the advantages and benefits of the specific product. And you gave the example in terms of having more of an open dialogue of actively leaning into the things that your product doesn't do. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you think that's such a key value that developers have and why that's so important?
Yeah. So let's imagine like you are a guy that is well known with cars, right? You know how cars work. You have like your own, like the car that you manually did improvements to that and everything. And then you are getting into a garage to add something. You know exactly the specification of what you need. And then you enter to a garage and then you feel like they are trying to selling you stuff that you don't need, right? Because that happens a lot with cars. They are leveraging the fact that people do not really understand about cars to give you whatever it needs, right? So this is exactly the same with software development. When a developer trying to find a solution for something or to find other people that experiencing the program. So let's think about the journey that the developer has when he try to or need to test a new product. They're going to Google, they try to find other people that experiencing the same problem, and they try to understand how do they solve that. They gathering all the details, they're trying to understand the picture really deeply. And if your message will be like in a top level of that, like in a higher level that put less attention into details, less attention to the exact technical needs, they will immediately understand that there is something that will not work with your product. Because software is a sensitive thing, right? When you create a software and when you need to develop quality on software and make sure that you stand in velocity and that you deliver features in time, you need to make sure that you pay attention for the small details. And you need to pay attention that you really understand the core of the everything you do from the engineering perspective. So the message with DevRel, the DevRel messages, no matter if it's marketing or advocacy or market education, it always have to pay attention for enough details and emphasize that I'm not trying to sell you something that you don't need. You know, like you always should balancing that in the content that you're creating, etc.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to pick up on another theme that you spoke about in your blog. So you defined the term around horizontal scaling. Can you explain a little bit about what you mean by horizontal scaling as an important engineering principle, just for those who are uninitiated? And talk about how companies can roll that out in their organizations.
Yeah. So I think because of the people that are going to listen us has some ideas how software work and design pattern. I think the best idea to imagine this horizontal scaling is speaking about domain-driven design. So at DevRel, person has many activities that can do, right? So they can, for example, create content, they can do community work, they can go to conference, they can do public speaking, they can do many things. If you scale it vertically, you're ending up vertically, like mean you are giving one person to do only one thing, right?
Mhm.
So one person do only one
What
thing
you
and
do
doing
is
details.
community outreach. You only do the keynotes. You only do the project documentation, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So what do you end up is like with many small things that these people are never getting to it, right? So you get into a point where many people in your organization focusing in one thing, but missing many points differently. When you do horizontal scaling, you're looking more on the, let's say, the domains that your problem trying to solve for the problem that you are trying to solve, right? So when you take people and you scaling the organization, like if we look, for example, on a software product, right? So if you do software, if you do, for example, let's go to the most classic example of vertical scaling. So you have a database, right? And this database has too much data on it, right? And you do vertical scaling, so you create another replica of the database, and again another replica, and then it starts to cost a lot because you need to balance the calls between these databases, and all the databases like everything doing the same. And there is horizontal scaling. When you look at why I need more databases, maybe another replica will not solve my my stuff, right? Maybe another replica will just create more overload to my thing, and then none of the replica will. So you look at the problem instead of looking at the solution. And same thing as when you are doing DevRel, you need to see the wider picture of what you are trying to do in DevRel. You need to look at the business. You need to look at even the funnel, the stage of the funnel that you need to most invest on, right? If you do, for example, if you bring someone, for example, just to write documentation, you'll stand and write documentation. Maybe in your stage of the funnel, documentation is less prioritized. Maybe in your stage of the funnel, you need to worry for more top of funnel users. So the DevRel people need to have like diverse skills and diverse activity that they do over their day job to create an organization to scale well whenever stage in the go-to-market you are in.
Sure. I guess one of the challenges with horizontal scaling, as you're describing it, especially if you're a senior marketing individual working at a deep tech startup, it can probably feel a little bit like you're trying to find a unicorn for individuals who are strong on documentation, strong on public speaking, strong on kind of community interaction, strong in terms of development. How have you solved that problem? And I guess how have you encountered those kinds of challenges in your work within Permit.io?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question, because that's exactly what happened to us. Because Permit.io specifically is I love to call it a radical PLG company. We don't have product people because our R&D team are developers. They know what developer need. We don't have any sales operation, although we are in a Series A and we already have like large numbers of ARR, like we are standing well in the market. Even in the tough situation that we have today, we are growing and growing. All the go-to-market team that we have is 3 people. It's me that leading the team. There is a community manager, and now it's not a community manager anymore. He is a technical product marketing. And I'll explain that because that's important to understand. A year ago, maybe 18 months ago, we've been in a stage that we tried to build our top of funnel, right? So when you look at a funnel for developers, so you have, I like to split it like in layer of top funnel, medium of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. Right? When you do PLG, you need always to balance the funnel between the vertical funnels, the need of your, let's say, design partner, the feature that the users require, and the top of funnel, because this is where your user is getting into the product. I saw many startups that do a kind of mistake. They are starting to sell to developers, but then they are falling into the bottom of the funnel. They are worrying about the complexity of feature, and then they lose the motion of the top of funnel. you can even think about it in terms of attribution. Many startups, many product managers are looking for attribution in the product itself.
Yeah.
Now, the product in the beginning does not have that much data to get the quality you need for do attribution. And you don't have enough top of funnel user to go there, right? So when we started, the most important thing in the top of funnel thing was to do like community activities. Being on Slack, replying to people there, trying to bring more people to community, trying to market, educate. When we went on the funnel, right? So we build a very stable top of funnel. Today we have 20K organic visitors on the website. So we need so we need to invest in a stage between the top funnel and the medium of the funnel. Now, if this person, this community manager, were insist to continue, I am a good community manager, I know the method to build community, we were stuck in top of funnel that is already stable. And now this position need to be replaced to the stage where we take the top of funnel and convert them into users, into medium of the funnel. So that's a great example how a vertical scaling, for example, if someone is insist, I'm a great community manager, I'll always do only community management stuff, and etc. and going on. And one of the things with developer go-to-market is your stages is very critical. And I like always to say that one of the most hardest thing in DevRel in the FOMO, because when, for example, I'm opening my Twitter feed and I have a lot of DevRels on my Twitter feed, and I saw that they are creating videos and working with influencers and going to conferences and creating very cool swag, etc., etc., etc. The vector that I'm missing is that they are all in different stages of the funnel. Maybe the market is much more educated for them. And then when they do webinar, much more people are arriving because they're understanding the problem. Or for example, let's talk about conferences. In the top of the funnel, conferences is not cost effective. You are going there, part of more 100 people. It's hard to get objectives. But for example, if you are a Datadog that you need to invest in bottom of the funnel, a conference booth can give you tons of upsell opportunities, right? So when you do DevRel, you have many, many activities to choose from, and you always need to be accurate in playing with the cards that you have now. And if you are choosing people or choosing role by skills that are generic to the work you need to do, it's not scaling well. But if you are hiring people that have a basic go-to-market skill, I mean, they know how to do growth, they know how to do attribution, they know how to look on data of the product, they know how to do advocacy, they know. It doesn't mean that you need to hire people that know to do everything, right? You can choose a bunch of activities that related to each other, let's say in general marketing or in general technical writing. But the skills need to be diverse enough to work in a fast-paced work environment.
Okay, well, because we have a similar kind of dynamic with Impact, and I'm keen to understand your take on this, because the challenge then becomes, well, what kinds of individuals are you hiring? Because there's an aspect of the role that you're describing as trainable, and then there's an aspect that needs to be basically deployment ready from the day they're recruited, right? So when you're thinking about recruiting new individuals or beginning to build and grow the team at Permit.io, what kind of qualities are you looking for from the type of DevRel executives that you're bringing on board? So you spoke about you started with a community manager. Did you intend to have a vertical scaling strategy when you began that process, which then pivoted into a horizontal scaling process? I'd love to hear a little bit from you in terms of what that process was like.
I think that's a great question, because I don't believe in hiring people that knows to do everything. People who knows to do everything usually just know to do weak in everything. Right. So when I'm looking at go-to-market, specifically as DevRel, I can find three, let's say, niche or something. The first one is regarding growth. Right. So this is the first thing that you need to do in go-to-market, managing growth, making sure that the product is always in a growth motion and developing exponential growth and not just linear. Right.
What does that look like in terms of attributes that you might be able to identify in the recruitment process? Because lots of individuals say, I'm good at growth, but in reality, it doesn't really mean anything until
Exactly.
you
So,
what
so
they
the
actually mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the experience I would look for such kind of role is marketing experience.
Okay.
Right? No matter is because think about it, the horizontal scaling at the end is like a group of skills or group of activities that these people do. Right? What important for me is that they have experience with development as a developer or as people who work with developer, and they have like the hard skill to operate everything related to this specific niche, let's say growth. So I want them to understand the basic of, let's say, PPC and advertising. I want them to understand the basic of crafting messaging, etc. And I want them to understand the basic of data analysis, BI, etc., etc. So like 50% is the engineering and development experience, and 50% is the hard skill of growth activities.
Okay.
Right? So this is the first thing. The other one is regarding community sales and work with people.
Okay.
Right? So this is the other type of activities. I want to get people who really enjoying from being with people. So again, I'm looking for the 50% of the development experience because that's the layer of the DevRel that I need. And then I'm looking for skills like communication skills, creativity skills, operational skills, because usually this is the people that operating like, let's say, conferences or webinars or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The third is about advocacy. I think this is the most engineering-oriented role in DevRel. I'm looking for people who are good in development, especially good with or love new product. I think one of the key to succeed as a developer advocate or as a developer, let's say, or a technical writer is people that are really happy with creating new product, with learning new technologies, et cetera, right? And then I'm looking again for the bottom line of communication, understanding, etc. So I think these three niche is combined for the horizontal kind of scaling. So I'm not looking for someone who is very senior, for example, in growth marketing. I'm looking for someone who did some marketing work, has the hard skill to understand marketing and growth, and has the 50% of the development or developer-oriented skills. In this way, in this categorization, I can get someone and get back to the example of the community manager. So we hire someone who has great communication skills, knows how to write, but for example, he did not have that extensive experience with operating marketing. Right? So this is a different person. And then we can always move them or horizontal or scale them by creating more and more. So let's say, for example, if I'm looking now at my organization, right? And I really need to scale, right? We just raised our A series and we need to scale. And what I can do now is hire people for the specific problem that I'm experiencing now. Now I'm experiencing a shortage in specifically developing application examples.
Yeah.
Right? But let's say that I'm hiring something with a great developer who want to work in tons of POCs, etc. And 3 months after, I have enough application example that I have, and I need them, for example, to start manage video content or to work on the documentation. So if I'll hire someone who is really senior developer and that can, create very fast these application examples, I lose later.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things on DevRel is that I can always outsource the specific areas that I'm lack, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, now that I need some application examples that work with permit, I can use my developer advocate, who is, for example, very good in the horizontal meaning of being an advocate, and ask him to create like templates and everything needed, and then outsource it specific for a developer who is experienced with the language that my person do not has experience with.
That's really interesting. Would you say that that's a common pitfall that other tech startups fall into, in so much as they get their Series A funding and suddenly they've got cash to burn? In the past, they've been budget constraints. They can't have the ideal kind of vertically aligned team within DevRel that they wanted. So they're kind of forced into a horizontal scaling strategy. But do you see this pattern where as soon as we get a bit of money, actually we're going to have somebody dedicated to focusing on the conference circuit? We're going to have someone dedicated to being a community manager. Yeah. Do you see that pattern?
Yeah, actually, I can talk about even in a wider thing.
Yeah.
I just read a post regarding startups that hiring, let's say, chief marketing officer in a very early stage, right? So they are hiring them, and their skills is to build a marketing organization. But when you are in a seed or Series A, you still do not need a marketing organization. You need get things done, right? So you don't need a CMO. You need an advisor, maybe CMO, that will help you now create a strategy. But for the day-to-day work, you need that like marketing operational people, right? So for example, I'll give you another example. I work with some outsourced advisors, and I have an idea for some activities that we want to create, and I ask him to create a plan for something. Then I got a really nice plan for this activity that I wanted to create. But this plan has so much details in it that I can't just operate it as a startup. And as a startup, I always need to look at a specific problem and find a solution for that, no matter the domain it is, right? I need to find a solution for domains. And this is something I always like to say that to grow a startup from 0 to 1,000 is a completely different work than grow a startup from 1,000 to 10,000.
Sure.
And it's completely different work than grow a startup to a corporate from 10,000 to million. So when you are, let's say, in the first stage of the startup, even if you look at the hiring cycles, the funding cycles of startup. So when you are in the beginning, you're a small group, everyone is doing everything. And the model to scale that is to add more people who are really agree to commit to the startup idea. When you went to a better growth, that's challenging because in one hand, you still need to maintain a very, very large, very like high growth expectation in one hand. But in the second hand, you can't let people who do the job to have a telescoping wider perspective, because that will make them worry about problems that do not exist, right? So in DevRel, it's actually the same even if you are a large corporation, because let's even take a look at, for example, AWS. AWS do tons of DevRel, and AWS actually has DevRel for every stage of the funnel. They have DevRels for the top of funnel, creating tons of content, and they have DevRels for the specific problem in the container ecosystem that getting more and more money to the very bottom of the funnel, right? And the world is fast-pacing, right? Today, the most trending one is ECS, but next year it will be a large movement into AKS. And then this very bottom of the funnel people will have to do top of funnel work. And if all what they like is like creating a long books around how to solve a problem, they will find themselves without a job, because what I need to do now is like migrating people in the top of the funnel, right? So even if you have the pace, the fast pace of the ecosystems and the way that you need to sell, making the DevRel people mandatory to be like horizontal people.
That makes sense. I think it's a bold aspiration, but I can see the pressures of needing and wanting to grow an organization quickly and facing constraints around the available talent in the market when you're looking for it. What recommendations and advice would you have for somebody that's looking to build a team that is multi-skilled and finds it challenging to find those individuals in the market?
So I think this is actually the way of looking at the team in the horizontal is also helping people to hire better people. And I'll give an example not from the DevRel field. I'll give an example from the development recruiting field.
Yeah.
It's always like a assumption that there is kind of people that is really hard to hire. It could be like, today is really hard to hire front-end developer, or like a good DevOps is something that you never find, right? And the reason for that is that people are not balancing their requirement. There is the famous joke like, I need someone with 20 years experience in React, while React born like in 2014, right? So there is always like a hiring manager who are trying to create a set of requirements that no one can stand off. And one thing we need to remember, especially in a competitive landscape, in a competitive like startup landscape, is that these great people will never join your startup. I mean, if you have a lucky and you're like a hyper growth developer tool startup, let's say Vercel, yes, you'll get those people. But 90% of the startup have the standard startup growth. And these great people so people are like taking model, right? So I want to, go back to the DevRel world. Yeah, I'm a hiring manager and I want to build a DevRel organization. And then I look at the market again. I'm going through my Twitter feed. I'm trying to find people, and then I'm trying to understand the factors. And then, DevRel needs to have tons of followers on Twitter, and DevRel need to speak in 3 KubeCons in a row, etc., etc. So the setting expectation is really hard. But what if we are looking at what we need from this DevRel, trying to look at our situation? So, for example, one of the ideas that, let's say that I'm working in the field of identity access management, like permit, and I need to hire a developer advocate. I mean, I need to hire for the niche of the advocacy, right? Yes. So instead of just saying like the assumption, for developer advocacy, I need someone with a YouTube channel with 10K or 100K subscribers. That's not the right assumption, because that if there is someone with a front-end channel with 100K subscribers, that doesn't mean that these subscribers are even relevant for your identity access management problem. So look at the job that these people will need to do, and then understand what is the right skills of the people that you can bring into this job and let them complete the other. Even look on myself. I did a lot of engineering job. I work in many like principal engineering in the field of identity access management. When I started to Permit, I have zero experience, for example, in growth, right? For example, I didn't even knew what are the different type of advertising campaign that are usual there. But I was very strong in the field of authorization. Since 2015, most of the product that I work on was in the identity access management field. So that means I understand very well what developers want or need when it gets to identity access management.
Sure.
And then I can learn. So we did have a CMO, advisor CMO, and we sit for a month and she teach me everything. Now, I can't say that I'm the best PPC person out there, but I am one with a very well understanding of identity access management, and I have enough experience to create the right campaign for identity access management, right? So instead of looking at the model that I want to hire, I want to look at the problem, what I'm trying to solve, and what kind of skills or experience can help me solve this problem. So it can be the domain that you are playing on, identity access management. It can be the programming language that you are focusing on. So for example, like if you have like the most common SDKs or the most used SDKs that you have is Node.js and Python, you mean that if you get someone who is very, very advocate in the Python field, you'll get it very valuable. And all what they have to learn is like the hard skills that will make them a better one.
Yeah.
But instead, in the month that it will take you to find someone that stand in your role modeling or the model that you look at Twitter and decide that I need someone like this, the same month you'll use to teach someone the specific missing field to do right, the developer advocacy, you will get someone who is good in the domain that you are trying to solve.
So at a high level, I guess, in the problem of hiring unicorns, your advice would be effectively hire people that chiefly have domain expertise first and foremost, and then train them for the things that are effectively trainable and teachable. with your example being, if you're looking for somebody who was well skilled and well integrated into the world of authorization, that's really hard to teach and train somebody who, say, has a background in paid marketing and advertising. But vice versa, it's more of a permissible model. That's really helpful advice, really helpful. One of the key things I want to ask just before we close is, what advice do you give to somebody who is just starting out in developer relations? What are the important things that they should focus on and think about?
Yeah, so that's, I think that's a good question. I am just 1 year officially in developer relation, but I worked before in CTO offices, so I used to know how to work with customers. I work closely with salespeople. I think the most important thing to understand or to think about is how to refine the communication skills. One of the things that personally is really hard for me is to break a problem into smallest problem. That's happened to me usually, for example, when I'm giving like when I'm giving talks in conferences. Many times I'm assuming that people knows the problem that I'm going to talk about. So I think the best skill to exercise when you are starting in DevRel is to exercise when you listen. You need to be listen more than talk. You need to look at the market and listen. This listening will get you understanding of people problem, and will refine your communication. So I think that the best like skill to exercise and to refine or to improve when you are starting is DevRel is active listening. Not just let people talk. Listen to them, understand the problem. If you are with a talk with customer, don't try to talk. Let them talk. And whenever they are finished the talk, do not propose the solution. Let them continue to talk about the problems, because listening to your users will create a better reactivity to advocate them better.
How would you recommend somebody becomes well practiced in the art of active listening?
So that's reminding me, I just interviewed yesterday someone for sales position. And we discussed about traveling, right? So salespeople like to travel, and he asked me like how many percentage of the travel. I also like to travel.
Yeah.
So and then he said that in his last job he used to work remotely, right? So 5 days at home. And one of the things is missing is like traveling. And when we start to think about it, this is the exactly practicing thing to do to refine your listening. Just go out, find people, talk with people. It's sometimes hard, especially for people with the development. So for me, like as a developer, but it's not an introvert. It's also focusing. It's also about context switching. For me as a developer, the best environment to work is like my home basement where I have like workroom, and we close there 24/7. I'll create so much software in that time, right? But when you are trying to listening, you need to be around people. So, for example, conferences is a great thing, is a great place to listen to people, right? Joining communities. One of the things that I'm doing, I'm holding a zero inbox strategy in our Slack community. I'm reading every message on our Slack community. Now, it's what you need to exercise is about context switching, because if you are listening and always try to solve problem, it makes you to not focus on the important thing. So this is something that to exercise, you just read the message and learn the lesson from it. Like every message from customers, every message from user, every message from a community member can teach you something about what you are solving. By the way, many times developers looking for ideas. One of the things that you are getting asked as a DevRel from people in the company and are the company, how do you find ideas what to write about? How do you know? I can say that our most successful content pieces is a note that I take with customer meeting. Every customer meeting that I joined, that's one of my objectives, one of my goals. I want to understand in this meeting what content I can create. And I can't do it without listen to the real problem of this customer or this user, right? So for example, I don't want to get too deep in our field of like authorization and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure.
But one of the things that I had in one of our last meetings is a developer who started to use Permit. They created a very like project around Permit, use their API, do everything. And then he explained me that he solved something that we didn't plan to solve.
Mm.
So he said, like, one of my problem was a specific problem. And I used the API to do something like that. And we never thought from the product perspective that we can launch it as a feature. So I take the creativity of this user of using Permit and create content around it as we have this feature.
Yeah.
Right. So we like
free
launch
feature,
a new
right?
feature. Yeah. We launch a new feature based on creativity of one of our users. And that always happens in Devel, especially in open source, that you have a ecosystem around you of developer who contribute. Listening will help you get much more content, much more creativity.
No, I love that. I think that's absolutely right, especially in terms of what we all need to do to improve our active listening skills and also staying curious as well. I think one of the biggest traps we can fall into is where we just lose our curiosity and assume reading customer emails or customer messages is beneath me. That's for kind of junior level staff. I'm definitely bought into your methodology around how to engage in active listening of what our users really care about. Gabriel, it was so wonderful talking to you. We'll have to schedule another call to deep dive into some other aspects of developer relations and what we're doing at Permit.io. But for now, thank you so much and take care.